So I'd like to spend a few minutes on Yom Yerushalayim. I'd like to spend this little shiur and begin by going down memory lane and then offering a thought that relates to the dream of Yerushalayim and the recognition that we're a long way from achieving the reality of the dream. But as a segue into these few words, wanted to begin with the beautiful, beautiful melody of Naomi Shemer with her voice. This melody became so popular that at one time there were those who thought it should replace the Hatikva. Of course, that I would say, thank God, didn't happen, as beautiful as the melody is. So we're going to play just a little bit of that, but then I'd like to play an old Yerushalayim song that my mother often sang. My mother loved to sing. And she would sing this in what was then called the Shomer Hadati. And the Shomer Hadati was the precursor to the Bnei Akiva. And the reason I'd like to also play that song after we hear just a snip of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, which everyone knows, is because it really indicates how even before there was a state, even before the state of Israel was established, people were yearning for Jerusalem, and not just from the 30s and the 40s. The yearning for Yerushalayim goes back thousands and thousands of years. Wherever Jews lived, we would end the Seder with L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim. We would end the Yom Kippur service with L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim. We would break the glass under the chuppah, and we would recite Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. Yerushalayim was always on our lips. And so let's begin just shuli with a little bit, maybe 60 seconds of Naomi Shemer's to bring us back to that moment of the Six-Day War.
Did you want more than that, Rabbi?
That was so beautiful, I must say. No, whatever you think, Shuli, you know best.
Well, I wondered if you wanted to go on to the other song.
Whatever you think, Shuli. I believe that in front of us is Yitzhak Shamir on the right, and on the left is Shimon Peres, both of blessed memory, and Yibadeh L'Chaim. I think that Bibi is in the center, but I'm not sure. Maybe somebody knows better than me.
I thought so too.
Yes. And my mother used to sing that, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim. Dee-dee-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Dee-dee-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Dee-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Dee-dee-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai. And what I'd like to do now is paint what appears to be a contradictory picture, imagery which seem to be opposites about the city of Jerusalem, and then try to then show how the contradictions, what seems almost like an oxymoron, can live in peace. The dream of Yerushalayim. What is the dream of Yerushalayim? So here I'd like to point to a phenomena in the Torah, which is found surely in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, sentence 29 and 30. We'll not go into the specifics, but I do want to show you a two-letter word, which is written, a two-letter word relative to walls around a city, which is written one way, but it sounded another way, even though however you look at it and however you say it, it appears to be the same. I know that that sounds convoluted, and frankly, the way I said it is convoluted. But there the Torah is talking about a house in a walled city which is sold in perpetuity. And basically, without again struggling with the law, the owner has the right of repurchase during the first year of the sale. But thereafter, it's sold in perpetuity, and it doesn't even return at the Jubilee, at the Yovel, when lands normally do return. Now, if we didn't chop that, that's okay. I'm just interested in something very, very specific. So let's take a look at these sentences. We're now on chapter 25, sentence 29. If we can make that a bit larger. Sentence 29. Can you point to it, Julie? Because I don't have a chumash in front of me, and my eyes are not what they
I
used to
think
be.
you're starting on 30, not on 29.
It
If
could
it
be.
starts with ve'im.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have to correct loving Torah.
Oh.
No, try 29. Let's go back.
Ve'ish ki yimkor.
Go ahead.
Beit Moshav, Ir Choma, V'haita Geulato, Ad Tom, Shnat Mimkaro, Yamim Tiyeh Geulato.
Okay, I've explained this sentence already. Now the next sentence. In other words, you have an entire year to redeem it. If I've sold it, I can buy it back at demand in the first year. Go on. V'im lo yigo.
V'im lo yigael ad melot lo shana tmima.
And if the owner has not been able to repurchase it, go on.
V'kam habayit asher be'ir asher lo choma.
So if I don't repurchase it in that first year, then the buyer has ownership of that house. And look what it says over here, Lakoneh lidorotav. Lo yetze bayovel. It is not returned in the Jubilee. But I'm interested in that word lo. It is, if you look at it, if you look at the word lo, the phrase asher lo choma, a walled city. Now, lo with a vav means that has, but it's written in the Torah with an aleph. So if you look at the parenthesis is the way it's written, lo, but it's read within the mind as if it says asher lo. So I'm going to read it both ways, and you'll see the difference between the two. And it shall be that a house in this city, and then if we're going to read it the way it appears in the Torah, a city that has no walls. It's written in the Torah with an aleph. But when we verbalize it, when the person who's reading the Torah verbalize it, he should read it, even though it sounds the same, he should read it as if it says it has a walled city. So let's try to understand this, if I can face everyone. Here we're talking about a walled city. Let's concentrate for a moment. And it's written and it's read that it has walls. But if we look at the way it's written in the Torah, it's not written Lamed Vav, it's written Lamed Aleph. And the rabbis talk about this. And what they say is that the test of whether a city is walled, what's the definition of a walled city? This too is a bit complicated, is even if it's not walled now, but if it had been walled when we first entered into the land in the time of Joshua, then it's considered walled. It's very similar to the way we observe Shushan Purim. I know this sounds very foreign to everyone, but what I'm most interested in is not in that Talmudic deduction, is an understanding of, I don't quite get it. If it has a wall, why is it written as if it doesn't have a wall? I want to repeat that. We're just focusing in like a laser. We're just lasering into that in the spirit of my laser. We're lasering into, it says in the Torah, we read it. This is a walled city. And in the Torah, it doesn't say it is a walled city. It says it's not a walled city. Now, this begs the rabbis, and not just rabbis, everybody can be a rabbi. This, men, women, this begs the reader to think about that. Why is it written differently than it is read differently than the way it is written? As a matter of fact, they're opposites. We read it, it has a wall, and it's read, it doesn't have a wall. And so here I want to offer a personal observation that I want to argue that Jerusalem is a walled city. The old city is a walled city. But what I want to argue is that only when the inhabitants of Jerusalem remove the walls surrounding themselves, right, will the city be secure, at peace, and whole. What's the best wall? Now, they say that fences make good neighbors. That's true. You need a walled city. But the ultimate walled city, understanding walled as meaning a city which is protected, is if the walled city is unwalled. And the way I'm reading this is the following. When is the city of Jerusalem a city that has real walls surrounding it? When is it secure? When it is unwalled. It has walls, but in effect, it's unwalled. And that means when the observant and less observant come to love each other. Yes, this is a far, far, far off dream when Jews and Gentiles, when they learn to coexist. Let me put it this way. Let's think about for a moment that custom of under the chuppah that the bride walks around the groom. You're familiar that we walk around 7 times, the bride. In the Chovevei Marat Bayit world, it's not just that. I don't know what happened last night, but it's not just the bride who walks around the groom. The groom can walk around the bride 7 times. Sometimes they do it 3 apiece, and then the 7th time they do it together. Let's think about the 7 times that the bride circles a groom at the wedding ceremony. What is that all about? That represents the bride or the groom making walls, with each having the intent to protect their spouse. So the bride walks around and says, I'm going to protect you. The groom walks around, I'm going to protect you. Or in a same-sex ceremony, each side is going to protect the other. But the circles under the chuppah are metaphysical. The walls are not true walls. They're not true walls. Think about the bride walking around the groom. There are no walls that are created. There are no walls, but the walls are created, and they're true walls because the greatest protection in marriage is the dismantling of barriers between husband and wife. That is what assures a couple that they can live together in peace and in harmony and in love. Making walls, but the best walls have no walls. Now, not coincidentally, the only city mentioned under the chuppah is Jerusalem. That's the only city that it is mentioned. I know it's 3 coins in the fountain, and Rome is the city of love, but the city of love under the chuppah is Yerushalayim. Meira yishama barei Yehuda uvechutzot Yerushalayim. That's what we mentioned, which, like the couple's love, will be at peace when it becomes a city of unwalled walls. A city of unwalled walls. I like that expression. Walls, but unwalled walls. And so why, when we talk about walls in the Torah, is it written that it has no walls? Because while it's true, as we said before, that good fences make good neighbors, But if you're really good neighbors, you shouldn't need a fence. The best fence is there is no fence. The best wall is there is no wall. And that's the dream of Yerushalayim. The dream of Yerushalayim, I pull no punches here, is that it is under Jewish sovereignty. That is, the Jewish Knesset is the Knesset that controls the city. It has a city council, and it's fundamentally a Jewish city council. But that doesn't mean that the Knesset is not made of non-Jews, of Muslims too, and even the city council of Yerushalayim. But what it does say is that the ideal of Yerushalayim, even as Israel is sovereign over Jerusalem, is that it is a city that is open to all. And when I say open to all, I don't only mean Jew and Palestinian. I don't mean Jew and Arab. I mean Jew and Jew. We all know what's going on at the Kotel and the battles that go on there. That is the dream of Yerushalayim. Ultimately, that is the dream. Now, that is one side of the picture. Now, I'd like to paint another side of the picture. The first side of the picture is that Yerushalayim means Yeru. It sounds like the word Ir, a city. Shalayim means it's a city that is shalem. It's united. It's a city of shalom, of peace, peace between all people, open to all. Now I want to paint the other side of the equation and to indicate how at first blush it would seem to be contradictory to what I said, and yet I want to argue that what I'm about ready to present is really in sync with the first approach. The second approach is that Jerusalem is God's city. When we say Yerushalayim, Shalayim, Shalom is also the name of God. God has many appellative titles, but one of God's names is Shalom. Shalom. I know that we kibitz around and we say we're one of the few people, I think in Hawaiian it's the same thing, but we're one of the same people who use the same word for hello, shalom, and goodbye, shalom. Rabbi Izzy Miller of blessed memory used to say, why do we use the same word? Because we don't know, we Jews, whether we're going or coming. But shalom, think about the word goodbye. Goodbye is really a play on the word God be with you. Goodbye. When we say shalom, what we're really saying is hello, peace to you, shalom, but we're also saying, may God be with you. Jerusalem is God's city. All over the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, Elamakom asher yivchar Adonai Elohecha. This is the city that God chooses. And Maimonides writes in his compendium that whereas there are places in the world that have holiness, that is, there is a kedushat makom, holiness of place. For example, our own bayit. The synagogue is a holy place. It's a holy space. It's holier than Henry Hudson Parkway. Israel is a holy space. Our homes could become holy spaces if we can make it holy spaces as well. In the spirit of imitating a sanctuary, it becomes a small sanctuary. But there's only one place, which is not just the holiness of place, but it is called, says Maimonides, Kiddushat Shechina, the holiness of God, the holiness of the omnipresent, the holiness of the Shekhinah, the holiness of the indwelling of God. And then he writes, as God is eternal, so too God's city is eternally God's city. Now, at first blush, when one says that Jerusalem is God's city, if I were to ask, does that mean that the city has a narrow vision or a broad vision? Is it a city which is particularly meant only for a particular people, like Jews, and it is certainly meant for us? Or is it a broader term? So I want to say something about belief in God from my perspective. There are many and many faiths that understand belief in God in a very narrow way. We were in an Uber last night. The driver's name was Simon. He is a Catholic, and he comes from Bangladesh. Bangladesh, he says, is 90% Muslim, and 10% it's Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian. The Christians are the minority of the minority. And he says there, you can't even speak if you're a Christian. There isn't, why is that so? And he tried to argue, because he's arguing, and here you're seeing a different side of me, that when you look at fundamentalist Islam, Islam says it's our way or no way. Either you're with us or you're against us. Either you're Da al-Ab or Da al-Islam. Either you're the world of Islam, and if you're not the world of Islam, then this is the world of violence. We have to go to war with you. There is nothing as beautiful as belief in God, and there is nothing more dangerous than belief in God. There is nothing more noble than fighting God's wars, but there is nothing more dangerous than fighting God's war. Because if I'm fighting a war which is coming from a human being, humans can be disagreed with. You can be the president of the United States, but in democracies, true democracies, we have the right to stand up and to protest. But if you're going to protest against a figure who represents God, I can tell you as one who protested against the Pope around the world when the Pope embraced Kurt Waldheim, when the Pope inspired the convent at Auschwitz or the church at Birkenau, and we protested the Pope, that was far more dangerous than protesting a president, because the Pope is the embodiment of God. And when you have that belief in God, most faiths would say, either you believe in our God, and if you don't believe, then there is no place for you. That's what too much of Islam is saying today. There may be some liberals out there who are reading into it in oral tradition, but that's really what most of Islam says today. And that certainly is what fundamental Christianity says today. You believe in Jesus, you're going to be redeemed. If you don't believe, you're not redeemed. And I want to say it unequivocally. I love being Jewish because that picture of God is not what Judaism is about. When God created the world, God created all of humankind. God didn't begin the world by creating Abraham and Sarah. He created all of humankind. And when that didn't work, and there was a deluge, and then there was the Tower of Babel, as a post-facto approach, in Hebrew we call that in halakha a b'diavad, a b'diavad, God says, okay, I'm going to choose a particularistic Abraham and Sarah, from whom will come the nation of Israel. But the goal of the nation of Israel is not to rule everyone out. It's not to make everyone Jewish. That's why we don't look for conversions. We don't look to convert, because you don't have to be Jewish to be leading a great life. You look to convert, you look to missionize, because the belief is, without my missionizing you and you becoming a believer, you're damned. The only way you can be redeemed is if you believe. So God says, I choose Abraham and Sarah, but the goal of Abraham and Sarah is not to move inward. The goal is to create a Jewish peoplehood who can do its share to bring light to the nations of the world. And ultimately, throughout the prophets, especially in the book of Yeshayahu and Isaiah, there is a discussion about all people coming into Yerushalayim. When we end Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur service, we end it all the way at the end by saying, Ki beiti beit tefillah yikarei lechol ha'amim. God says that my house, my Bet HaMikdash, is a house for all people. In a certain way, this is what distinguishes the Jewish understanding of God. The Jewish God, that understanding, is a very all-encompassing concept. That doesn't mean that we deal lightly with any of our rituals, Shabbat, Kashrut, Tefillin, Taharat HaMishpacha. It doesn't mean that we deal lightly with our sense not only of, for those who wish, of Jewish religiosity, or we deal lightly with Jewish nationhood, with the Jew being not only a religion, but a nation. Of course, those particularistic standings are very important. But a city of the indwelling of God, which at first blush seems to be a city which is separated from the rest of the world, and hence it contradicts our first presentation of Jerusalem being a walled city, but the ultimate walled city is the unwalled city. There is no contradiction, because our understanding of God is a very broad understanding of God, that all people who live according to the fundamental principles of Musar, of Tzedakah u'Mishpat, as God says to Abraham and Sarah, V'shamru derech Hashem lasot tzedakah u'Mishpat, they all have a place. And so that is what I want to put forth. We started with Yerushalayim being a city, Yeru, Ir, a city that is shalem, united, shalom, at peace, open to all. We then moved to discussing Yerushalayim as a city of shalom, a city of peace, a city of God, where shalom is uppercase. Shalom could be lowercase, peace and so on. It could be uppercase. It's a city of God. And just to summarize that second half, whereas at first blush, a city of God seems to be contradictory to it, to being open to all, that's precisely what it is not. It is not a city which is closed. The ideal is that it's a city which is open as per, I believe, God's wish. That's what Yahadut is all about. We care about our particularism, but as I've said thousands of times, our sense of who we are as a people does not contradict our universal responsibilities, but it is a prerequisite to it. And when I look and when I hear my mother's song that was sung by so many Zionists, when I think about all of our grandparents and great-grandparents going back, dreaming about Jerusalem, probably some even dreaming of Jerusalem during the pogroms and Chmielniki and Kishinev in the 20th century, and of course, the Shoah, and going to their deaths thinking about Yerushalayim. When I think about that she'ifah, when I think about the liberation of Yerushalayim, what a moment, what a hope. And yet, we're so far from that dream. When one hears of the battles taking place at the Kotel, the screaming and the yelling, and my position is, for whoever wishes to hear it is clear. I think that Kotel, first, I have great respect for the Haredim. They have been constantly at the Kotel. They have taken the responsibility of making sure that someone is always there. I believe that since 1967, not for 1 minute, 24 hours a day, 24/7, There has always been someone at the kotel. That kotel was never empty. And they deserve credit and they deserve their place. But so do our conservative and reform sisters and brothers. And what Natan Sharansky worked out as a compromise should have been implemented a long time. And there should be a place, because in that compromise, frankly, there was no place for our understanding of modern Orthodox as being an open modern Orthodoxy. There was a place for the Haredim, a place for mixed seating, but there was no place for a mechitza and people coming and women coming to the Torah and the women's prayer groups or in a partnership tefillah or something like that. The test of Yerushalayim is it's open to all. And today when I think about Yom Yerushalayim, I mean, there were those who argued, without getting into the halachic disputation, that the real Hallel with the bracha should be said on Yom Yerushalayim and not on Yom Ha'atzmaut. I believe it should be said on both. But today, Yom Yerushalayim, it's a holiday that is basically kept by a significant but narrow part of the Israeli and Jewish population around the world. When the dream is, it should have been that city that all Jews can talk about and can sing about. Yes, a city that was so far from this after October 7th. And this is the reality. Anyone who thinks that there's a time now and a place for a Palestinian state, I believe is out of their mind. All we need is a state in Yudan Shomron, what some call the West Bank, that's going to be in the belly of Israel, that could be taken over by Hamas and all of these horrible terrorists in an instant. That's the dream of Yerushalayim. The dream of Yerushalayim is it's a city of unwalled walls. The dream of Yerushalayim, it's God's city, but a God who says, I love my people, but I love all people. I love all people. And I offer the tefillah that we be able to realize that dream. And just so that we go back to 1967, here is one of the most famous radio transcripts of a reporter as Jerusalem was being liberated at that very, very moment. Let's listen to it. I'll try to translate, although the Hebrew is not difficult, and then we'll open it up. This is...
There is a translation.
Okay.
And there are some images that came from historic library. So I hope this is what we want.
Okay.
Okay. It's only about a minute, so everyone listen carefully.
אנחנו הולכים ומעמיקים לתוך העיר העתיקה.
And there are other transcripts which has the reporter saying things like, Eineni dati, I'm not religious, whatever that means. Because I think anyone who is part of liberating any soldier of Israel is very religious, much more religious than I can ever even dream of being. And this reporter says, Eineni dati, aval zehu hakotel. But this is the kotel. We actually heard the voice of Mati Gur, and Mati Gur was the general who liberated Jerusalem. And I have heard just before our shiur, Shuli played for me a tape where you can hear Mati Gur say, when you enter the city, don't touch any of the homes. Don't touch any of the holy places of others. They're sacred and they must be protected. I'm sure you know this, that for 19 years, when Jerusalem was in Jordanian hands, I know this because I was in Israel in 1961 and I wanted to go to Jerusalem. And we actually had a plan where we would dress up as priests to try to get in, or we would dress up as Muslims to try to get in, because Jews were not permitted into the old city. The city was Judenrein, and we were ready to implement this dream, but I just couldn't see myself as dressing up. I couldn't find myself as dressing up as a clergy from another faith. And as you probably know, all the synagogues were destroyed. Cemeteries, the monuments of cemeteries were actually used to build latrines. And when you walked in the streets, you would be walking on the monuments because the monuments served as the cement that people walked on. That is what was going on for 19 years. And since that, then, with all of the issues, Jerusalem is an open city. We have a long way to go, but we have a lot to be proud of as well. And I think that Shuli may have that tape, and then we'll open it up for your comments.
Okay, let's see.
אנחנו יושבים על הרכב שצופה אל העיר העתיקה, ועוד מעט אנחנו עומדים להיכנס אליה. העיר העתיקה של ירושלים, שמאז כל הדורות חולמים עליה ושואפים אליה. אנחנו נהיה הראשונים להיכנס אליה.
לרגע זה אני יורד במדרגות אל הכותל. אינני אדם דתי, מעולם לא הייתי, אבל זהו הכותל, ואני נוגע באבני הכותל המערבי.
We're a long way from realizing that dream. And you know, I've marched in these Yerushalayim parades, but when I hear some of the chevra and they're screaming death to the Arabs, that's not who we are. It's just not who we are. We're for Jerusalem being the united eternal capital of the Jewish people, without any hisusim, without any doubt. But ultimately, it's a city under our sovereignty, our protection, our security. But to be Jerusalem, it has to be an open city. I want to stop here, take your comments, and I didn't think I'd get this emotional, but it's very emotional when we're living history. We are living history. And to all of you, as difficult as things may be, I always have to remind myself how blessed we've been to see the establishment of the state of Israel. My parents, many of you were living when there was no Israel. We get up in the morning and we take it for granted. There's an Israel and it's grown, and there's a Jerusalem, and a lot to be grateful for. Julie, if you can help me with...
That video was really emotional.
Yeah, that's the famous video.
Yeah.
Where Eineni dati, אבל זהו הכותל, ואני נוגע באבני הכותל. That's really gone all over the world.